Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of Satellite Preview 1984. We have a different panel for you this time, and the discussions will be a little different. I'd like to take the time to introduce some of the people on this panel, but first I should note that our fifth panel member, Sally DiDonato, Vice President of National Satellite Communications from Latham, New York, unfortunately was unable to be with us today. It appears that she took a week's trip to the Caribbean to have a vacation and rest up and overdid it a little bit. Anyway, we hope Sally will be better shortly, and we'll see her in Las Vegas. Peter Dalton is back with us on the panel, this time wearing his President of Space cap. He'll occasionally also be called to comment as President of KLM again. John Kaul, President of Kaul-Tronics, and our most gracious host and sponsor of this show. Lloyd Covens, publisher of Channel Guide and several other magazines, of course, who we hope can give us some input on programming. And Rick Sneringer, President of STTI, who has been putting on shows for 4 years in this industry. I think one of the questions that we all wonder about is how are we going to do next year? How much product are we going to sell? Is it going to be a good year? Is it going to be a bad year? Well, I think that there's little doubt that 1984 is going to be a blockbuster of a year. The question is, how much of a blockbuster? Peter, you've been quoted as saying 600,000 systems. Do you think that's reasonable? Can we achieve it?
Well, Chris, I think the market demands will be 600,000 units. Coming off of 1983, calendar 1983, where the volume was approximately 200,000, perhaps a little in excess of 200,000 units, which incidentally was a triple off of 1982. 1984, in my mind, will be a triple of 1983. And there are a couple of reasons which support that. The price of Earth stations has continued to come down, and consumer awareness, which has really been the biggest obstacle to date, continues to be less of an obstacle. However, consumer awareness is still one of the big problems that the industry faces. The cloud of the industry's legislative position continues to change in a very favorable light, and that will be a catalyst for sales in 1984, as I believe it was in 1983. I think a couple of things need to happen, however, in order to achieve the 600,000 unit level. And these things perhaps were easier to achieve in 1983 because the absolute number was considerably less. One of the things that needs to happen is that dealers and distributors and manufacturers need to take a good hard look at inventory levels and stocking levels. Throughout the growth of this industry, the pipeline has been extremely short, and that really starts at the manufacturers who have been oversold since day one. However, there has been some reluctance on the part of dealers to carry a working inventory. The mode in 1982, for instance, was one to show and one to go. And I think that because of the consumer awareness and consumer appeal of the product in 1984, it is going to take more than just one to go, if in fact the dealers and the industry is going to hit the 600,000 level. Now, the plus side of that is that the dollar commitment to stock more than one to go is considerably less than it was in prior years, certainly considerably less than it was in 1982. And so the working capital commitment is greatly reduced, translating to it being a much more affordable situation. That, coupled with the fact that there are a number of financial entities who are now involved in satellite television, willing to floor dealer stock and willing to create consumer financing, this adds fuel to the sales position. But all of that is contingent on the dealers taking the aggressive posture of stocking the merchandise. The cost, the dynamics of the lower the cost, the greater the market potential, I think is definitely in play. And what has led to that, and I think what will be a very big factor in 1984 is, aside from design engineering, design cost engineering, is the additional fact that manufacturers are investing in making heavy capital commitments for production. In the past, most of the products which went into the industry were made by hand. In 1984, I think we're going to see a large portion of the products made not only by hand, but made on capital-intensive and or made with capital-intensive equipment. And that, as I said, is a major commitment by manufacturers. And it is in fact the area where the Asian producers have shined, because they have made tremendous capital investments for production. But I see that occurring here in the United States in the TVRO industry. And as that occurs, and it has already occurred in a number of manufacturers, the volume capability expands quite a bit. Interestingly enough, also the quality aspects of the product improves. So I see the capital commitment on the part of the manufacturers as a key factor in this formula, in addition to the willingness of the dealers, and I suppose that really means the recognition on the part of the dealers that the market is going to be very big, much bigger than it was in 1983, and in order to take advantage of that market, everyone in the pipeline must be willing to stock inventory.
Okay, so we've got you on the record as saying 600,000 systems for 1984. We got lots of witnesses in the audience. Lloyd, you're in the publishing business. You're obviously privy to a lot of information. You talk to manufacturers, distributors, dealers, consumers, the whole gamut. From letters and talking to these people, what are your predictions for '84? What kind of growth can we expect?
Well, I think the new market, if you will, of the general public is being addressed right out of the bat because of positive factors, as Peter mentioned. We came out of January with the Supreme Court ruling on the VCR case, and they indicated that the private non-commercial use within the home of video cassettes, movies, whatnot, time shifting, the use of video cassettes, and it not being a copyright violation gave us, I think, what will be a 2 or 3 year benefit in the general public mind. Copyright issue has been set aside by the nation's highest court. That's very positive in the public arena. I think people are aware that the satellite communications capacity that's out there is very large. Once we get out of this mindset of there's one HBO and that's all that's offered, people realize the benefits of instructional, educational programming, the whole gamut. So I think we're developing not just a neighbor saying, I've got a dish, here's how it works, but the general public and hopefully the media and programs like this that bring public awareness out about the technology. And that, in fact, I think will bring the kind of record growth that Peter sees.
So you agree on the numbers, basically?
Well, I'm not a manufacturer. I certainly would like to see it. I think that there will be at least a 450,000 increase, or almost 1 million systems installed at the end of the year.
In place?
Yes.
Okay. Rick, you and I first met in Miami in 1980 in a little show. As I recall, there were about a dozen antennas outside, maybe 50 or 60 booths, and a lot of very excited people. It was almost like a Dutch auction. there was many more people wanting equipment than people who were selling equipment. I think the shows are a mirror of the growth of the industry. By looking at the growth of the shows, we can gauge the growth of the industry and how it's matured. What are you looking at in 1984?
Well, first I'm going to correct your one statement about Miami, not 50 or 60. I dare say, I don't recall the exact count, but there couldn't have been over a dozen, 15 tables. A table, if it had chairs, that made it a real plus. But they were standing around showing their equipment, and as you say, well, that signaled the day of arrivals with equipment, maybe one fiberglass dish on the back of a pickup by a couple fellows in overalls. Those same fellows are now flying their twin-engine planes and going all over the world, gone into a variety of other branches perhaps of the same industry, but just doing extremely well, and they're still doing it. And but at the same time, talking about the quantities of dishes out there, we've always used a question of, say, 1 million families. This was developed by a subcommittee of the Senate under Senator Baker a year or so ago, that there were 1 million families in the United States that have no TV at all. Not that they couldn't afford it, they're just in forests or behind mountains or someplace where they can't ever get cable or very little TV. There's supposed to be another 3 million families that get only marginal TV, 1 or 2 channels. That small number still hasn't even been scratched. There's 600,000 more systems this year. If you asked that statement 2 years ago, maybe 25 to 40,000 systems, you made a real error if you tried to guess there and missed by 5 or 10,000. It's less difficult to make an error in your guessing now, because our feeling is we're in Oklahoma, we're not in hardware, we act as sort of an information bureau because of that from people all over the United States, and we hear a lot of things that come by. But it's our true feeling that the market has not even been scratched in any form whatsoever. Moving into towns where the town people want them now, they haven't gone to fake dishes so you can have the status symbol of having one in your yard just because you can't afford the other gear, but one of these days it may become that popular. But back to the shows have greatly evolved from, say, the 10 or 15 booths of Miami and dishes that barely made the trip down there because of the fact they were made so poorly in those days. But we're going on now to live in the realm of 200 to 300 booths at these shows, and 150 to 200 antennas showing. And again, I think that part of the industry is going to level off, but it still has room to grow.
John, you're in the antenna business.
That's right.
Is there a problem if we assume that Peter and Lloyd and Rick are right, and we're looking at 600,000 systems this year? One of my concerns is because the antenna business is fragmented, much more so than the receivers or LNAs. Can the antenna manufacturers keep up with good quality product?
Well, I think if the demand is there, that undoubtedly there's going to be manufacturers to jump in there and do the best job they can to fill it. In our own case, and which I can talk most familiar with, our situation is the way that we manufacture the antennas. It's easier for us to gear up than, say, some of the other type of methods that are made, because it's a stamping process or a hydroforming process, so we can manufacture the antennas quicker and still maintain a good accuracy because we're using a die type situation. And I think you're going to see probably more of that type, more injected type mold, where the process could be speeded up greatly. And there's a lot of antenna manufacturers out there, and I think a lot of them are looking to this year to be the big year and are gearing up for it. In our case, we're moving to a different building and gearing up for it. Peter alluded to the fact that last year it was easier to double or triple. In our case, we tripled from the year before. But to say that we can triple again, it's a harder statement to make, because you're working with a lot bigger numbers. Jacob mentioned that earlier to me, and it's harder to produce 3 times as many when that gets doubled all the time. But to answer your question, I do believe that antenna manufacturers can step in there and hold their own with good quality antennas. I think the methods, the way they're manufactured, and the style and types of antennas may evolve differently to this next year, to some smaller antennas and that type of thing. But I think we can do it.
One of the critical factors in achieving the volume growth is the lead time of parts. There are some parts that are very sensitive to lead time, especially memory type devices in the electronics area. We might also include gallium arsenide devices, although the shortness of supply in gas FETs is not clear, but it is definitely a potential problem area. Well, that translates to forecasting, perhaps better forecasting, because if in fact the industry is to achieve any level whatsoever, forecasting has to occur, and that really starts at the dealer level. If the dealer in fact is able and willing to make his own forecast for his own region and can transmit that information back to the distributors, who then would transmit it back to the manufacturers, the entire industry will be in a much better position. I think this product category has operated pretty much on a demand basis, except with the manufacturers who, in the area of sensitive parts or specialty parts, have had to do forecasting without the benefit of the dealers, and in order to ensure parts. Lead times, for instance, on memory devices is currently running anywhere from 26 weeks to 52 weeks. And there are a number of memory devices which currently are at 52 weeks. If the dealers in fact can make their forecasts, if they in fact would back the forecast with purchase orders, as occurs in some other areas of consumer electronics, the industry itself would be better off, regardless of whether those purchase orders indicate 400,000 units, 600,000, or 800,000.
Isn't it probably unrealistic to, we've got a lot of new dealers coming in all the time. They're in startup situations. The dealers that are there have only been there for a couple of years. The growth of this industry is phenomenal.
Yes,
Isn't it very difficult for them to project how many they're going to need next month, how many they're going to need in July?
Yes.
Isn't it just as tough for them to give you the feedback?
Yes, I think it is, and has been and will continue to be, and I think that's why the manufacturers, if they are going to keep the machinery running, have had to make their own predictions. But I suppose what I'm saying is, if the system were to work, or what I think everyone would like to see is that the system work on a better understood basis, a more fluid basis in terms of lead time and parts arrival. And the way that happens is with forecasting and forward-placed POs. But you're right, because it's so new and so dynamic, it is difficult.
Let's take
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Not quantity, but talking specifically about the electronics versus the antenna segment of earth stations. Would you say, Peter, as the Far East becomes more and more involved in electronics and fewer companies really are able domestically to get into startup mode, the sense I get is that antennas and mounts, the hard, heavy pieces, will almost always remain a North American product as the electronic segment shifts more to the Far East. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I can't see the Far East or any area outside of the United States producing dishes, and the reason is really centered around the cost of distribution. There is, at least to date, no way of getting away from the fact that there is mass involved in the dish, and the dishes are heavy. Freight rates are based on weight to a large extent, and that's an area that I don't see foreign manufacturers even interested in.
Even down to 2-foot dishes, 1-meter dishes?
Well, if in fact the TVRO market as it stands today, from a technology standpoint, moves into 1-foot dishes at 4 gigahertz, then there's a chance that there would be competition from all over the world, not necessarily, incidentally, the Far East.
John, you chose to manufacture a one-piece hydroform stainless steel antenna. I think there's certain controversy shaping up. We have fiberglass sectional antennas, we have fiberglass one-piece antennas, we have mesh antennas, we have spun antennas, we have stamped antennas. What are the pros and cons? What are the benefits? Why did you choose a one-piece antenna with all its inherent shipping problems?
Well, a couple of reasons. We talked about higher production and maintaining accuracy. If you're going to a stamping process, a one-piece antenna lends itself to manufacturing and being able to hold the tolerances much more so than a segmented antenna. The disadvantage is an obvious one is shipping. We're hedging on that in the fact that we're opening up some regional warehouse facilities, so the shipping can be smoothed out a little bit. One thing I just want to digress just a moment on what Peter had mentioned a little bit earlier about ordering ahead and POs and that type of thing. We're in the same situation for the raw materials that we need, stainless steel. We have to project. We had a meeting to sit down to try to determine how much stainless we were going to use for the next 12 months. Very hard to do. And to order to nail down the price and have any sort of a handle on what the price is going to be so we can maintain the price, because we had a price increase in the raw material as aluminum and everything else. So aluminum antenna manufacturers have to go through the same thing, and to have something smoothed out with POs would be, for a manufacturer, a dream come true, because you could project ahead, maintain prices better, and not have to go from spot market as you were sometimes. But that's as dynamic as the market is. It's a harder problem to contend with.
One of the other difficulties, Chris, in not forecasting, the first difficulty being the possible absence of parts, especially critical parts. The other problem or potential problem with lack of forecasting, regardless of the degree of sophistication, is that it creates a danger of oversupply, which in an oversupply environment will end up hurting everyone. Not just, there has been some talk about possible oversupply hurting the manufacturers, but in fact, if an oversupply condition exists, everyone who is in the distribution channel will be hurt. And failure to make forecasts or translated to wild forecasting is liable to develop into a serious oversupply situation, which will destroy the distribution chain and the dealer network.
What's wrong with having a shortage? Plenty of the big ones, automobile dealers and manufacturers and others, I don't know whether they create them or not. They hope they don't have to. But the 84 Corvette is a good example. I don't know whether it's still in short supply, but all the guy has to say is, I'm going to get mine in about 3 months now, and he can't wait. An American can't stand having to wait for a product. He goes 8. I'm not sure we're ever going to get into that situation, but we could, and not self-created. But if a person has to wait for a month or 6 weeks for his system to come in, I tell you, he'll be down there every day the last week, hurrying you up. So it might not hurt, but oversupply, I think we're a long ways from it. I really do.
I hope so. I think we've seen a situation where we've had a shortage for the past 3 years, and I know many customers who've waited a month, 6 weeks, 8, 10 weeks even for a particular something that's popular.
We don't want to repeat the computer, personal computer market because the turmoil there took some dynamic companies and just turned them into terrible losses overnight. And there again, the sky was the limit in personal computers also, or so the theory was.
There seems to be a growing trend towards mesh antennas. I remember my wife about 3 years ago when she saw the first mesh antenna, and she said, gee, I could live with that in my backyard. Peter, you build a mesh antenna. There's problems with mesh antennas as well. Would you agree that, as John has stated, everything is a trade-off? John's going with solid, hydroformed, one piece for accuracy, for speed. Obviously, they're easier to assemble in the field, the one-piece antennas. A mesh sectional antenna, such as the one KLM builds, it has the reduced wind loading. It's easier to ship. Who's going to win out?
I'm listening, Pete.
Well, I think both are going to win out. You're right in that the solid one-piece antenna can be, in most cases is, more accurate than the segmented antenna. And as you mentioned, or as your wife mentioned, and I'm not so sure that isn't where the household budget rests anyway, the cosmetic appeal of the mesh antenna and the various colors which they come in, not only ours but the others in the industry, has great home appeal. But then again, you go back to the cost aspect of how much time does it take the installation crew to put the antenna up, and the one-piece antenna can win there. So it seems to me your question of who's going to win out is really a situation where both win out. As the electronics become better, and they have become better, the mesh antenna, curve deficiencies, the accuracy deficiencies become less important. However, to the solid antenna, that translates to the fact that it can become smaller. So I don't see it as a clear-cut winner. I think that they address two different desires in the marketplace.
I think, Rick, at the shows, you probably notice at every show now more and more mesh antennas are showing up.
Very definitely. At the same time, we're having fewer antennas, which is a marked change from the first 2 years ago. In that we, at our show in Las Vegas last March, we had 180 some antennas. We had just a larger show at Nashville in September, but had fewer antennas. I think the business is evolving into the hands of the larger manufacturers who can do quantity, they can distribute better, get them scattered around the country where they need to be. But at the same time, the sizes are getting smaller. Of course, I do still have problems with somebody like my good friend John, who says he's going to bring a 60-foot trailer out there loaded with antennas, so I'm going to prepare for a 120-foot trailer. And we have the magnitude of displays is just overwhelming. I'm very proud of our industry and the way that they have grown and grown with the way they come to a show and show off their product.
I think one of the things we have to remember, we get carried away with the electronics and the antenna and all the high technology of this. And what the dealer is doing out there is selling programming to a customer. We've gone past the hobbyist enthusiast stage, the ham radio nuts. We are now into a consumer-oriented industry. The guy who walks into your store, he's coming there not really to buy a dish, not to buy a receiver. He's coming to buy 50, 60, 70 channels of programming. It's a matter of choice. He wants more choice in programming. Lloyd, do we have a problem with programming? Are we looking at a shortage of programming? We've got 30, 40 new movies a month on the satellite. Can Hollywood, can the industry keep up with it?
Well, I think that the distinguishing factor that I really like to talk about when I'm out on the road and giving speeches like this is, let's take the movie, first-run movie, or flash dance, 48-hour, that concept, and set it aside just for a moment. There is very little in the way of competitive media that can deliver immediacy for news, sports, data, stock information, ad hoc teleconferencing networks. The dynamism of the satellite receiver and the satellite system goes much beyond just movies. The fact remains that the consumer is still oriented, we think from our research, basically towards the first-run big-hit movies. If we could get a show of hands, we'll go through these categories. How many of you here in the audience would be interested if you said exclusively of these 7, I would only watch first-run movies? Show of hands. Good. 8 people. Classic movies are, we used to say, things you find WTBS, Superstation, CBN, USA Network. older movies that come in two varieties. Star value of the last 10 years versus movies of black and white movies that are, quote, classics. This is something that distinguishes itself, really, from the first-run high-ticket movies. Obviously, the area of sports is important. Any classic movie buffs here that would say that's their #1 preference? Sports, what about that? So we've got about half as many people looking for sports as here. What about news? Nobody. The area of children's programming and instructional, which we combine, for instance, not Home Theater Net, but its companion on satellite, the Learning Channel, is a combination of instructional and developmental type programming. This is where colleges, high schools, preschools all get in the act of satellite reception. And Peter has made a commitment in his company to have KLM be active in the educational area. Adult television, again, is a very big source, and I won't ask for any hands. And miscellaneous other programming, specialty programming. The efficiency of the satellites itself brings such a wealth that this issue of can Hollywood produce movies, I think, is a little narrow because it is significant. Certainly looking at it does not represent, I'd say, should not represent the total sale to the consumer, the commercial areas, as I mentioned, ad hoc networks and databases that will develop will make this type of communications very efficient and very much in demand. The other areas, and again, let me be brief with this, but the other areas where we see developing demand for first-run movies, and in terms of that kind of complications that arise from how many places can you get the same product. Paramount Pictures lowered the cost of videotape from about $80 to $90 to $40 and began with Star Trek II. That had an immediate effect of bringing the first VCR to a sale of 50,000. Raiders of the Lost Ark is now reaching 500,000 sales in cassette form. And as I alluded to earlier, the Supreme Court ruling has probably put us in a position where VCRs will be in 4 out of 10 homes. New technologies, multi-channel MDS, they're going to have to, as the result of their
Dalton, President of Space, on this panel, and Rick Sneeringer, President of STTI. There's been quite a bit of conflict and a lot of brouhaha about the upcoming shows in Las Vegas in March. And I don't think it serves any purpose to go into the background of it. I think it speaks well that these two gentlemen are sitting at the same table. And I think what we should look at is the advantages of what has become back-to-back shows. Space is having a show the 18th, 19th, and 20th of March at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. STTI is having their show on the 20th, 21st, 22nd of March at the Riviera. As for dealers who are attending, for attendees, for anybody going to attend, in actual fact, I think you'll find this is a bonus because you can go 3 or 4 days to Las Vegas and you'll actually get to see 2 shows instead of 1. So there is a bright side to it. Peter, what are your comments? How do you foresee Las Vegas for both Space and STTI?
Yes, I'm glad to hear you say, Chris, that what has started out to be a difficult situation, in fact, is going to end up being a benefit for the dealers who will be able to come to Las Vegas and see the showcase of the industry, not only at 1 show, but at 2 shows. It is, in fact, at these various shows, which in fact, STTI has been at the forefront of, where the new products are announced and innovations are disclosed and industry prognostications occur and information exchange occurs. And so I think it has turned out to be a blessing in disguise that the shows are right next to each other, because it ends up being a economic convenience for the dealer and actually a functional convenience for all of the attendees.
Rick, what do you look for in March?
Well, I think it's going to be the scene of more order writing, one show or the other, than our industry has ever seen. It heralds the opening of 1984. The dealers will feel, whether they attend both, and a lot of them will attend both, they certainly can't afford not to be there at all. And we have found, I deeply appreciate being on the tail end of it rather than on the front end, Pete, from a selfish standpoint. But I'm just bringing up one point. It is interesting to watch the buyers operate at these shows. They look for the first 2 days, and then they get their order books out and their checkbooks out on the third day. And you can see dealers standing around for a couple of days wondering when lightning is going to strike, but that last day makes up for all of it. So we hope that happens for both of us this time, and I do fully predict the biggest kickoff in the industry from this show to start feeding the pipelines from the manufacturers onto the shelves and out in the field to come from this show at this particular time. The weather is always good in Vegas in March, and going to knock on wood. We certainly hope so. But it's an entertaining place for the whole family to come to, and I think it's going to be good. It's going to be great.
Yes, I do too, Rick. And from the industry standpoint, Space likes to use these shows not only from an order writing standpoint, or perhaps not even necessarily from an order writing standpoint, but also likes to use the shows as a forum for getting legislators and agency officials involved in our industry. We view that as a very necessary thing to do. I indicated earlier that one of the problems in our industry was lack of consumer awareness. However, that is not overshadowed by the fact that there is lack of congressional awareness and legislative awareness relative to our industry. And Space feels that it is very important to continue to educate these people in Washington, and we have used our shows as a vehicle to do that, to get the people involved.
I think that's a very good point, Peter. And just before we continue in that vein, we are going to have a question and answer period for our audience, and we have a microphone set up over there. So I know you're just burning with desire to ask questions. So please kind of wander up there and grab hold of that mic, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. I think Peter's point on Space should be well taken. There's many of us who haven't agreed with everything Space has done, and I don't think anybody does anything absolutely right. But the fact is, we do need a trade association. We do need representation on the Hill of some sort. Space is our association, and thus we do have to support them in certain ways. That doesn't mean we can't disagree, but we do need to support them. If there's changes that should be made, they should be made from the inside. Let's get in there and work. I think Rick will agree with that. There are certain disputes going on and so on and so forth, but they are all workable.
Let me speak briefly to the this idea of an economic consequence. I, for myself, feel that the economic consequences that are suffered go two ways. We have on one hand a person deciding to go to one or the other show, losing the market of the second show, or in John Kaul's case, a person that is building two complete booths from scratch, which is an economic hardship. Yeah. The third level is the lawsuits which are pending between the two organizations. It seems to me like the only person making out here are the attorneys on both sides.
I think the fact that Rick and Peter are sitting both here at the same table indicates that there is some discussion going on, and that perhaps a workable solution will be forthcoming in the future. Any industry that's new like this and dynamic and growth goes through growing pains. Personalities do get in the way. Frankly, it'd be damn boring if this didn't happen. We have to. I've been involved in several industries, and I remember way back about 20 years ago, I got involved in the sailboat business when it started becoming very big. And I remember the teething pains and the birth pains we went through. Very, very similar. We had trade association fights and we had manufacturers fighting. It is to be expected. It's human nature, and it will be settled. Of that I'm convinced, and you got me on tape as saying that very soon STTI, Space, and the rest of the industry will be on good terms. Okay, let's take some questions from the audience. Would you please identify yourself, your name, and tell us what you do?
Yes, my name is Chuck Storley. The name of my company is Midwest Microcom over in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I'd like to field two questions, if I might, one to John Kaul And that being, John, for the last year and a half, 2 years, there's been a lot of excitement about DBS and the 12 gig band. Today is the first day that I've seen it it's been pushed aside. DBS is now encompassing the whole band, the 4 gig, 12 gig, and everything. The last time I was attended one of your shows, you said that the 12 gig band was there. It's here, but it's not all what it's cracked up to be, and that a lot of things affect it, the weather, and so on and so forth. Now, are you considering the 12 or the DBS to be the 4 gig also, the C-band also? Is that what you consider
Well,
DBS now?
DBS is direct broadcast system, and to a point, or satellite, and at this point, that's about where we're coming with the higher power of the Galaxy and some of the new birds that are going up. Enables us to use a smaller aperture antennas with better electronics, and I don't think it's there's kind of been a misrepresentation from people that are pushing for DBS. They're promoting it actually before there's anything there. I think Peter could maybe help me a little bit on that, but
Yes, Chuck, I think that that something has happened relatively recently that was not predictable a year ago, and that is as a matter of fact, perhaps the leaders of the two largest programmers, distributors as they are called, for instance, Warner Amex is a distributor. The leaders of two of the largest program distributors both said independently of each other and at two different times, but within 60 days, why should we go ahead and make the investment at 12 gigahertz when 4 gigahertz DBS is here? Perhaps we should change the name to DBC, Direct Broadcast C-band. The home market industry has done a phenomenal job in bringing the services which we originally anticipated bringing and petitioned the FCC for the ban, bringing on 12 gigahertz is now here and in place at 4 gigahertz. Why should we spend the money to go to 12? So that's been a relatively recent change from the programmers themselves.
All right. I guess the most important thing is we are dealers. We are out there in the trenches. We are trying to field the questions from the clients who come in and ask basically two questions of us. Number one being, I hear the smaller dishes coming around. I'm going to wait, see. The second question is, and I want to address this again to Peter, this is foremost in their minds, being the client. What are the legalities? What is HBO doing? What are the rest of them going to do? And the only thing we have to say in answer to that is we don't know.
No, I'd like to submit that that's not the only thing that you have to say, although we don't know the full answer. The first question of I hear small dishes are coming, and I might as well wait, is really, I think that question addresses the sales technique. And you can create a number of metaphors that address that particular problem in how to close a sale, which I really don't think is the context of your question. Small dishes coming at 12 gigahertz, yes, that's probably still going to happen. It's going to happen in Europe perhaps much quicker than it's going to happen in the United States. Because if in fact all of the programmers, and particularly if in fact Hollywood, the production studios, recognize that DBS is here but at DBC, then the 12 gigahertz concept changes considerably. As a matter of fact, I would predict that the 12 gigahertz concept then becomes somewhat of the interactive concept and the digital concept, which we see coming in the next 10 years. And the video software stays at DBC, at C-band. I think that's a likelihood. The legal issue, and let's say the involvement of HBO and HBO's posture has changed dramatically. but in deference to HBO's desires, I think it would be unfair to say that they've made up their mind. I don't think that they have made up their mind as to what they are going to do. But I can tell you this, that 2 years ago, they were in an adversarial position relative to the industry. And that is not their position at the present time.
Can I address one short thing on programming? The issue that seems to be evolving with the DBS 12 gig people is programming. Mr. Murdoch of Australia wanted to launch Skyband. He made a little trip to Hollywood and found out, sorry Charlie, the money was big bucks, the exclusivity, this how many homes thing was brought on. This is not everything on satellite, the Satcom 3, Galaxy, and Westar 5. But I would like to submit that everybody who will get a programming product via 12 gigahertz will get it from this group of programmers. The misconcept has been, let us pretend that we are going to somehow evolve a new sports network, a different news network, a different set of movies. We talked about First Run. They'll be the same movies. It will be derivative services. The first service to launch, USCI, which went into Indianapolis, has ESPN in their 5-package lineup. But they have very few subscribers. Our guesstimates is less than 300. And this is a capital investment of about $50 million. So USCI has spent a ton of money for very few people, and the next candidate up for 12 gigs is ComSat and STC. I don't expect that Mr. Murdoch will ever be in DBS, and I think that you might be talking about USCI versus STC with programming that is coming from this menu, not in addition to or exclusive of. Obviously, the cost factors of how much programming does that viewer want is going to come into play as far as DBS is concerned at every juncture. If they want 6 channels, DBS may be fine. If they want 80 channels, I think C-band is going to have to be their only alternative.
Thank you, Lloyd. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Gary Saunders with Century Satellites in Broadhead, Wisconsin. I'd like a little more of your comments directly regarding scrambling, number one, which I think you've sort of hit on. Number two, I'd like to have you look into the future 5 or 10 years from now. What are your projections? Is our growth rate going to keep up at this rate? And how do you see the dealerships evolving? Will it be specialty satellite stores, television stores that are handling satellite equipment, and so forth? Okay,
I'll kind of open it up with a few comments, and then let some of these more qualified gentlemen field that one. There's approximately 100 million households in North America. I'm including Canada and the US in this case. TV households, if you will. A report just issued by the Canadian government last week said that 1.2 million Canadian households were drastically underserved. If we do some number crunching and we know that the population of the US is 10 times that of Canada, we can probably assume that 10 million homes in the United States are badly underserved as far as television. In North America, that immediately gives us a market, a strong market for 11 million homes, a strong market. I say strong because I have many friends who have cable and a satellite TV dish in their backyard. If you wanted me to look 10 years in the future, I'd say there's probably potential sales of 20 million systems of one sort or another.
12 or 4.
12 or 4. Peter?
I think that if you quote the cable operators, they will say that DB satellite services, whatever band, have a potential market of somewhere between 10 million and 40 million homes. Their projections include, in some cases, pass-bys. The 10 million comes from areas not served and never will be served, and in marginal television reception areas. I think that spells tremendous opportunity for the industry. I think the industry will, the industry as a dealer, manufacturer and distributor network will move forward with technology, and I think we can expect to see technology take on much broader depth in the future. Currently, the industry is involved with television and in some cases audio services. I think we will see that expanded as time goes on, and I say lucky the dealer who got his feet wet early in the satellite or the video reception end of it, because as the technology advances, continues to become more sophisticated, and we're dealing with a very sophisticated concept and product. As this happens, the product becomes more sophisticated. It has to be somewhat handled by the specialist. And the people who were here early or who take the time to learn now will be in a posture to handle the technology that will be coming in 1985, 86, 87. Relative to scrambling, I think that what the industry needs to have is a mechanism to pay the programmers for the programs that are up there. I don't think this industry wants or should ever want to have free programming or the concept of free programming. Now, either the consumer pays or the commercial aspect as it exists on VHF and UHF television pays, but someone has got to pay. And I think that that's right. Now, if in fact that formula translates to scrambling, I think that the industry should move forward with scrambling. The programmers deserve to be paid. What I'd like to see and what I think is best for the industry is if we had a common-based encryption system. The incredible danger is if there is not commonality in encryption. And if HBO goes one way, Showtime goes another way, ESPN goes another way, and network sports goes another way, the industry has a real problem, because we may be looking at a situation where earth stations are costing $1,500, but scrambling devices for the 5 or 4 or 3 preferred services are costing $2,500. And that's an absurdity when, in fact, today, an encryption system is available at $25 a unit that will work for every programmer up there, can be turned on and turned off at will. In other words, if you didn't pay your bill, can offer pay-per-view, such as fights and Super Bowl, as well as monthly services. All of that is available right now at $25 a chip built into every receiver. What does it take to make that happen? It takes the agreement of all of the programmers and the distributors. And how's that likely to happen? I believe probably the pressure will come from Hollywood to have the distributors put that together. But the real danger is if that doesn't happen. And I can tell you that space is very, very active in that arena right now today, and has been active in that arena for about 6 months, because we view that as one of the overall dangers. The original danger was they wouldn't allow us to buy the programming services at all. That no longer seems to be the danger. The Betamax case, as well as things that have occurred, that Space has helped occur, the Richardson Pryor, Waxman, the Goldwater bill, and the FCC ruling, all of those things which Space has been active in have helped to change the posture from we're not going to deal with you at all to maybe we ought to find a way to deal with this industry. Now the danger is, well, what happens if one goes one way, one goes another way? Where do we sit? And that's why I'm telling you, and I'm knowledgeable on this because I personally have been very much involved in this aspect of it. We need common encryption and decryption standards for the industry.
Satellite television is here now. It is here to stay. And there's three real basic reasons. First of all, there is no better way to transmit television signals, bar none. There is no practical way to cover the Earth's surface with television signals for the millions of people who live in non-urban centers. In North America, there's a trend right now. More and more people are moving out of the urban centers, moving into the rural and suburban areas because of lower cost of living, quality of life, whatever. Cable systems cannot supply all these people. It will not happen. We're a generation of television watchers. We've been brought up with television. We're a generation of people who like to have choice, be it cars, food, clothing, whatever. All you have to do is go to Europe to see the difference. Go to England and you get 3 television channels. Americans wouldn't put up with that. Satellite television is simply an extension of regular television, of cable. It's an alternative. And it's the fastest growing industry in North America right now. I'd like to thank our panel for being with us today. Many flew thousands of miles to be here and to have to escape very busy schedules. John Kaul especially, for donating the time to do this on the air. I'm sure you're all aware of the cost of production and satellite transmission. It is greatly appreciated. I would also invite all our viewers to let us know whether you enjoyed this, whether you'd like to see more of this type of show, hopefully better. We could expand on it, but we need to hear from you. You can drop a note, or you can come and grab me at Las Vegas, or send a note to John, or grab him. He's bigger, he's easier to hold on to. But let us know. If there is demand, we'd love to do more of these shows, and we hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Remember to look for Kaul-Tronics at the upcoming shows in Las Vegas. Booths 18 and 19 at the Space Show, and booths 113 and 115 at the STTI show. And now, on behalf of the Kaul-Tronics Corporation, thank you for joining us for Satellite Preview 84.